Thank you, Madam Speaker. 1,800 times. In fact, over 1,800 times, the Prime Minister promised in the 2015 election that that would be the last election under winner-take-all, first past the post. Now, I probably don't need to bore you with the details to know that that promise wasn't kept. It's obvious that politics got in the way. But why does it matter? Well, first, because promises matter for Canadians across the country to have trust in our democracy, particularly promises as significant as that one. Secondly, because winner-take-all, first past the post dramatically distorts the results and the interests of Canadians. As just one example, in Ontario's last general election, the current party that has now 100% of the power at Queen's Park only earned around 17% of the popular vote. What a massive distortion that first past the post continually leads to time and time again. In Quebec's most recent election, just another example. Another reason why it matters, though, is because it's been proven time and again that first past the post is not appropriate for Canada. In fact, the member for Saanich Gulf Islands, when she spoke on this same topic last night and joined in this advocacy, as she has for so many years, calling for electoral reform, she pointed out that 8 times since 1921, this House or various law commissions have studied the issue. They've found that first past the post doesn't fit well for us, and they've recommended we do something differently. So we're going to continue this advocacy. Here's what's in the works. Earlier this year, I introduced a motion working with Fair Vote Canada to call for a citizens' assembly on electoral reform, to take the politics out of it, to have regular Canadians come together like a jury to get expert opinion. This would be a randomized group who would then make recommendations back to parliamentarians. This approach is supported by 76% of Canadians. Fair Vote Canada volunteers then went out across the country and met with MPs and spoke with them about the importance of following this intention from Canadians and supporting this motion. We were allowed up to 20 joint seconds in this place on a motion. Thanks to the work of those volunteers, MPs from the Conservative Party, the New Democratic Party, and the Liberal Party joint seconded to fill up that list. In fact, Fair Vote had to create a separate website to show all of the MPs who wanted to be known for their support. There are almost 40 now, including the Parliamentary Secretary who's with us here this evening. The Liberal Party themselves then had a convention earlier this year where they also endorsed the idea, the grassroots volunteers of their party. It's why I asked the Prime Minister about it shortly after to say, in light of all this, has his opinion changed? At the time, it hadn't. His answer was a kind of a my way or the highway. Until we have consensus on a winner-take-all ranked ballot, he wasn't interested in moving ahead at the time. The good news, though, is that while a vote on the motion I brought forward wouldn't happen for some time still, the member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith, took it upon herself to bring this motion forward. She'd drawn a much better number in our lottery system for private members' motions, and there will be a vote on it. My question for the Parliamentary Secretary is, will there be a change in focus from his party to now support this really important motion?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's nice to be in the House tonight to talk to my friend and colleague from Kitchener Centre. It's my pleasure to rise today to speak to the importance of democratic reform in Canada. The Government of Canada is committed to strengthening Canada's democratic institutions. Our electoral system is the fundamental rules determining how votes are translated into seats in the House of Commons is one of the most foundational pieces of our democracy, and it's also one of the strongest in the world. Among many things, it provides Canadians with a direct connection to their Member of Parliament, who must work with every one of our constituents to develop national policy and make political decisions while engaging and remaining accountable back home and increasingly digitally connected Canada. Our current first-past-the-post system is not perfect. Certainly no system is, but it has served Canada well for over 150 years and continues to advance the democratic values that Canadians want reflected in their system of government. It includes strong local representation, stability, and accountability. How Canadians vote and how we govern ourselves is fundamentally important, and it impacts us all. Given this government's view has been very, very clear. Any major reforms to the electoral system should not be imposed on Canadians, but rather it would require the broad support of Canadians. That's something that's hard to achieve, Madam Speaker, because as the member stated, only 17% of Ontarians actually voted in favor of the Premier. I think that was the number that he provided. It's tough to get people to the polls. We all have that challenge every election. What we do during the period of an election is we go out to our supporters and we make sure that they vote. And voter turnout is actually pretty low. It's higher for federal elections than it is for other levels of government. But in Canada, it can be challenging to get people to engage. And that apathy is something that we all have to challenge a little bit. As the member stated, I'm a signatory to the idea of having a National Assembly on democratic reform and pursue some type of better representation. But I'm also fairly of the opinion, personally, that it shouldn't include more unelected people, more people that don't know exactly who their representative is. I think it's very relevant to my community that they know exactly how to find me. Just before I was here, I was in my office over at the Valor Building, and a member of my community reached out over Facebook Messenger, and I just gave him a call, and we chatted for 20 minutes. He knows exactly who his member of parliament is, and that's very, very important to the integrity of our electoral system, because I can be accountable, I can be reassuring, and I can make sure that his voice is heard in here. However, some systems of proportional representation would have members of this House that don't directly have a constituency, as members of the Senate do, and I have concerns about the lack of accountability, and my concerns extend to both a future potential unelected House of Commons, as well as, quite frankly, an unelected other place. Given this and all of these things, our government has been very, very clear that we are not of the view that a new system ought to be imposed on people. And after the 2015 election, our government consulted very broadly with Canadians. Many members of this chamber held town halls in their own riding on this topic, and we heard a myriad of ideas and concerns, which is important throughout that engagement. However, no clear preference or consensus emerged. Therefore, the government decided not to proceed at that time. But I think that's where the utility of a citizens' assembly could be really effective. I had a great conversation recently with Fair Vote Canada, and I'm supportive of the notion of Canadians coming together to talk about how our electoral process and system of governing could be enhanced. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member Kitchener Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to start by pausing on this point about any kind of reform being imposed. This notion, to me, is not a fair argument to start with, because, well, that's what elections are for. Promises are made, people are voted for, and those promises are meant to be followed through on. I think that's a really important promise from the 2015 campaign. But not to belabor that point, I really appreciate the support of the Parliamentary Secretary for this motion calling for a citizens' assembly. But he knows, like I do, we're going to need a lot more support across all sides, including from the governing party. Can I hear more about, through you, what he's going to do to build that kind of support? Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I think most members of the House of Commons have their own strong views on this. This really comes down to how we arrive in our current place of work. And every community is very different. I think that given the diversity of Canada's landscape, how different a riding is like Kitchener Centre is from your riding, Madam Speaker, on Manitoulin Island, a place that I love to visit, and I didn't make it to this summer, but I hope to next year. Those two ridings are really, really different. And, the systems by which you do your work in those two communities are very different. So to answer the question clearly, how am I going to encourage more discussion? I'm going to stay open and honest on the subject. I'm going to meet with my constituents and talk to my colleagues here in the House of Commons about how we can create a more robust democratic institution here in Canada.